It was a very dense afternoon, and we were introduced to very different environment and milieu, and we had we had some new lights in some fields and environments which are were a bit unknown to me. The most unknown probably is the one in the Ciudad de Mexico. But anyway, the thing that I see there are important new evidence on people who joined the conference, who joined the 1930 conference, because what we were presented about Stanley Kennedy North, and also what we were presenting in Martin de Wild, that is more known somehow, the Stanley Kennedy North, but we didn't know how much it was actually a sort of forerunner in those years. And we do understand that the people that was actually called to join the conference in Rome in 1930 were very different among each other, and some of them were actually self-promoted, as probably Stanley Kennedy North, who was a genius in the communication, whereas Martin de Wild, I see that he was probably taking advantage of his own personal training in his own family. What I do see is that we have some of these people really, we don't know where they were trained. So, for example, a question for Camilla is also about the training of Stanley Kennedy North, that if we know something about him. And then, but I mean, just few questions, and then I leave it to the speakers and to all of you. I think that it was important to know about the lessons of Louis Pasteur, and also if there are some evidence of any relation between his study on the darkening of oil and the decision of Paris, for example, to introduce the Ostwald measurement of the darkening of oil, which it sounds a sort of legacy somehow. But anyway, the training is something that is important, and so it was very. I didn't know about Karel de Wild in 1922 teaching, which is something before Forbes, is something that really was something that maybe you could say something more about how this could have happened. But anyway, the important thing is to understand that probably the conference in Rome was a real attempt to find people who could be involved, who could be really these experts that we're searching for. In those times, there was no actually evidence of any training that could help Foundokidis to approach an institution or somewhere. So, I mean, we have probably also this self-promoted people coming to Rome and trying to. Anyway, so who wants to reply first, and then if there are any question for the public? Yes, please, Camilla.
I'll take the first one. I have no idea. I have no idea how this man became a conservator, how he got entrusted with some of London's most famous pictures. But I think what happened is that when I started researching at the Courtauld, the only thing in the Manet and the Renoir file was there was no treatment report, there were no photos, there's nothing. It was just this really long letter from Courtauld's secretary, shall I say, and it was talking about how basically they made the decision, created a committee to decide how to have this painting restored. And the two restorers they had chosen was there was George Morel, who came from this really long line of liners and restorers, and like father, grandfather, cousins, nephews, all of them were restorers. And then there was Stanley Kennedy North. I was just like, why did they choose him? But I think what happened is that the Courtauld was just getting established at the time, the Institute, and Stanley Kennedy North, with his modern ideas, just fitted into that ethos, into that modern way of life, and I think that's what really attracted Samuel Courtauld, and that's why he hired him. But I have no idea how he became a conservator. I have no idea how he even just learn to do X-rays. I've been reading a lot of newspapers thanks to COVID, but I've not been able to find that out yet.
Because there is an access to archives?
Sorry. Oh yes, and yes. So luckily, Stanley Kennedy North has a grandson who has a blog online, and I just said, "Are you related by any chance to Stanley Kennedy North?" And he was. And so his archive, Stanley Kennedy North Archive, is going to come to the Hamilton Kerr Institute, because we are an institute with a lot of restorers' archives. So we have Helmut Ruhmann and many others. So yeah, thank you.
We hope to know more in the future. Anyway, Stanley Kennedy North was in the commission, as you remembered. And in the procès verbal of the commission about the varnish, everyone was saying different things. Everyone was actually promoting different recipes, and it was a real chaos probably in the varnish at that time. So also this could be a hint for the research about him. Thank you.
For the Wales, why making this step to go to university? Why making this step, coming from a family of conservatives, to go to university? I think the success of the family firm is important. They met so many international people, and Martin also, as a young man, traveled with them. I think that gave them, let's say, confidence that they were, that they could think they were important people, they were respected, and of course it's also, of course, the emancipatory structure of schooling in the Netherlands, that it was possible for him to go to university. But the very precise answer is maybe to be found in his enormous archive that I do not know completely, but it's kept. Mm-hmm. And you also want to know more about the Philadelphia Initiative. I do too. I just discovered this clipping last weekend, so that's all the information that I have for now. But of course, I hope to dive deeper in it and to find something more about why that was organized. But clearly, of course, it was felt in America that people responsible in museums did not have enough knowledge to take proper care for objects. So it must have been born from that idea, and then the fact that they had this successful Dutch restorer in New York so close, that must have stimulated the idea. But that's just filling in the idea than really having studied it.
Mm-hmm. But we know about the structure of the course. I mean, how the course were planned, we don't know.
No, it's as said, there's a bit of information, and
mm-hmm.
they say clearly that it is meant for people that will work in American museums. That's already a good indication that it was meant actually for art historians. Mm-hmm. But that's about it. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any question?
Sure. I mean, I could talk a little bit about that. I don't believe that there's a direct connection between Pasteur's work
for
on,
sure. It was just strange.
Pasteurization and art. But one of the things that Pasteur's biographers emphasize is that he was, as a thinker, he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. So right before the École des Beaux-Arts, he was a professor in Lille, which was a newly created university, so it had no equipment, no staff, no anything. And during that time there, what he does is he spends his time working with French farmers, and it's in that period that he begins to conceive of yeast as this living microorganism, which was not known, really. So we see the same methodology of wanting to go and work on site. So what Pasteur does when he gets the job as an art teacher is he just walks around the Rive Gauche of Paris and on the Rue Saint-Jacques, and he goes and he talks to an artisan who fabricates stained glass windows. He talks to a man who relines paintings for a living. He talks to these more well-known artists like Tony Robert Fleury. And he writes down his observations. And the other thing is that we see clearly that the notebook is a work in progress. He asks many questions, but he doesn't necessarily arrive to many conclusions. And that's because basically Paris had one of its very, typical outbursts of student political activism. So Pasteur was forced to resign his position at the École des Beaux-Arts and the Normale Supérieure, where he was working as an administrator. And as compensation, Napoleon III created his laboratory on the Rue Dôme, where there is the École Normale Supérieure. So in effect, Pasteur poses all these questions, but he never has the time to develop them any further.
Yeah.
And, so that's what I would say.
Was he probably interested in to explore this new field, or was it a way for him to move back from Lille to Paris? Why did he take this job that was so far?
Yeah, no, it's straight up careerism. He's in Lille. Before that, he's in Strasbourg. He's exceptionally competitive and ambitious. So he knows, look, it's in Paris. I got to be where the action is. He gets this job. He takes the job at the École Normale Supérieure, where he's not teaching. He's an administrator. So he's dealing with all these annoying details, and he's very severe with the students, and everyone hates him. So, yes, it was careerism. But at the same time, there are biographical details about Pasteur that are interesting. Before he was a student at the Normale Supérieure, he did study art with the teacher of Courbet, interestingly enough, whose name I can't recall at the moment. But, and Courbet, Ornans, is very close to where Pasteur grew up. But no, Pasteur was not necessarily one invested passionately in the arts. I mean, he was not involved in avant-garde art in Paris in any way. And if you look at the choices of who he chose to interview, people like the architect Félix Dubon, these are people who are more establishment figures, not people on the avant-garde like Courbet.
Thank you. It's really been intriguing. For fun, would anybody like to comment on a famous forgery or two and how they were detected using scientific means or other?
In general?
In general, just, yeah, in general. Anybody know anything about, I mean, we heard about the Dutch example. That was fun.
So it's not my turn.
How about here in Florida? Any forgeries come to light in the past decade or two? Or National Gallery or in Mexico? Any research done on that? Just since we're on the topic of science and detection and that sort of thing. Thanks.
You asked for a case of forgery at the Prado. We have one exhibited in the new copies room, is a forgery false Greco, but was not bought by the Prado. Is a gift made in the 80s of the 20th century. I think it's the only case of a forgery at the Prado, and it's not an acquisition by the Prado, if not a painting which came to be studied, and then the owner gave us in the last.
Where is the painting right now?
The painting is exhibited in the room. It's in the copies room.
And it's identified as a forgery?
Yes. It's identified as a forgery and is exhibited with its X-ray inside. Next to the painting. Yes, it's identified as a forgery. Yes.
Very interesting. And how was the forgery discovered?
How is I can?
How was it discovered? How was the painting discovered to be a forgery?
Because if you visit the room, the painting is awful. It's not a Greco. It's a very bad imitation. Maybe it's a copy made without intention to be a forgery, if not a copy that then was by as a forgery or by a copy. Sometimes we don't know if all the forgeries were made a forgery or a copy after thought as a forgery. And then the X-ray shows that under the surface there is another sheen from the 19th century or 18th century. It's not an image by the Greco, if not more later.
If you want,
Thank you.
I can add something to your question, another answer to your question if you want. First of all, of course, talking of people is very important in discovery. That gossip about if things are genuine or not. But to give a general answer to your question is difficult because there's so much dynamics in the way it was discovered. And thinking of just the few examples I gave from the Dutch situation, at first we see that the alcohol test was avoided by using a glue-based medium. But when Hofstede de Groot published that pamphlet, of course, all the forgers could read as well what had been done there because of the report of Scheffer. So they knew, okay, we are done with water-soluble mediums. And that's also the reason that Van Meegeren, for example, he developed another medium, even an artificial plastic bakelite-like. And of course, then how was it discovered? It was very hard to, even if when Van Meegeren had confessed that he had done it like that, it was still very hard to prove it. Yeah. And also interesting, Van Meegeren didn't use any pigment that was not from the 17th century. And of course, he could use the book of the will to see exactly what was to be expected in a painting like that. So it was, of course, it's a progressive history with constantly information made public, of course, made forgers find other ways, and then scientists had to try new testing to see if they could see that. Yeah.
It was still I against chemistry, I mean, also in the 40s. I have just a curiosity for Camilla and Aldona about the Bodum Marconi equipment, the one that he used for stereostratiradiography, the 1, 2. Is it still preserved, the equipment?
I don't think so, if it is still preserved, because we had
we have a huge problem during the Second World War, and
no,
things were destroyed. Also the archives. Also, so we based with our lecture on the information from pre-war, but published information mostly, because most of things which were worth for German military, they steal it, they destroy it, they sell it to Germans. So we have a huge hole in our history.
I can imagine.
So after the Second World War, Marconi had to rebuild the equipment because after war, he was a very important person in the Polish cultural life, and in fact he was called a father of the Polish conservator school. In fact the most important part of his life was connected with this after World War period, and that was the most important part of his career. So the equipment built after Second World War.
And I can only add that it wouldn't be possible if not the strong support of director of the National Museum in Warsaw, Stanisław Lorenz, because he helped Marconi to develop new technologies in the museum before the Second World War, and after he supported very much to make it one of the strongest conservation studio in the museums in Poland. So.
I read an online questions. How do those early research and use technologies dialogue today with the advances in artificial intelligence? How important would historical, physical, and mathematical feedback be for artificial intelligence? Okay, so it's a hard question. What I would say, now, what I was talking during the break with Maurizio, he's there, with Maurizio Lorber, was that I find very interesting that when we talk, we are still talking about Morelli, and then Maurizio told that these schematic drawing were a way to begin the classification, to begin to help the taxonomical process and to make it clearer. But we know that any simplification, any simplifying drawing is losing information, part of the information. So the problem is that when we were actually working simply with our brain, we have actually to simplify at a certain level, which is useful for us. What I do see now is that also the Morelli method could actually take advantage and step at another level if we used properly the artificial intelligence out of what we read in the newspapers when any new Raphael was found through the artificial intelligence, and we do see photos or pictures which are unbelievable. But the point is that if we actually use this possibility, this chance of calculation, to deal with these huge amount of documents that we do have now, which are not related just on the surface, but on all the process, and we could actually also force this calculation in the dynamic process of the procedure of the painting process, then probably this new era could help, not simply for the attribution, which is always like a shortcut, is a sort of secondary problem in my opinion, but to understand more about the technical, the way the paintings were and the artworks were actually done. I don't know if I've replied to the question, which is very complicated. I don't know if someone wants to give a further reply. Do you want to say something, Irene, or?
No, well, first repeat the question, then.
I lost it.
Is it about the possibilities of?
No, I mean, the question is, specifically in the first part, how do those early researchers use technologies dialogue today with the advances in the artificial intelligence? So that's what I told about Morelli. You want to say something? Brava.
Bueno, como la pregunta está hecha en español, voy a responder en español.
Claro.
Para mí, yo creo que estamos ahora en el momento en el que la inteligencia artificial ha salido, se lleva trabajando mucho tiempo en ella, lo que pasa es que ahora de repente pues, ha explotado. Estamos en el momento en el que la inteligencia artificial para mí es una herramienta, como lo fue en su día la radiografía, como lo fue en su día la reflectografía infrarroja. O sea, solamente tenemos que hacer un debate crítico sobre cuáles pueden ser las aportaciones de la inteligencia artificial para no perder el control. Pero solo tenemos que hacer con cualquier herramienta que nos sirva para estudiar las obras de arte o para estudiar cualquier aspecto del mundo natural o del espacio. O sea, tenemos que ser críticos con cómo utilizamos la tecnología, todo. Y yo creo que esa es la respuesta. Es una herramienta que puede ser muy útil, pero que también cuando lo utilizamos vemos que falla mucho, porque al final los datos con los que trabaja, pues algunos son fiables y otros no. Luego estamos nosotros que tenemos que discriminar cuáles de esos datos son útiles o cuáles no. De momento yo estoy en ese punto.
Okay.
Is it better if I ask it in English or Italian? Unfortunately, I don't speak Spanish. Thank you. Because of the brevity of the interventions, which I much appreciated, I'd be curious, you mentioned about the introduction of chemistry as scientific studies in support of archaeology at the museum, and in general, the combination of scientific studies with archaeology and the birth of archaeometry has been a slightly better marriage than with the fine arts. And I wonder if you could comment, or you have found in your studies, what was the reception at the time in the 1910s of the art historians and in the Bellas Artes of this incorporation of scientific expertise at the museum? Thank you.
That's a great question, because I was wondering the same. If the art historians or the historians was a reception positively these studies, and I found that they didn't. Well, the historians was separated from the scientifics, so these studies were separated, and this research was about the possibilities to apply this microchemistry and identify the pigments and other binders in the paintings. So they have a big discussion. And then in 1910, Mexico has a very big period in his history, the revolution. So the National Museum stopped his studies and all research about the objects. So at the 30s, actually, they started again with X-ray, with microchemistry, and other kinds of research about the paintings. for the Fine Arts Museum and the codex from this museum. So this period, this history period, stopped this research. So they didn't apply it. That's the reason that I stopped in this, because in November 10th, the Mexican Revolution began. And then after a decade, they began again.
Okay. If there are no more questions, we can... Bye.
I had a kind of open question in my lecture. Does anyone know of another restorer chemist with a PhD at the time? Or, for example, when were these kind of images published for the first time? So if you know, tell me. But also I think it's important to, if we want to write this history, of course we focus on people, we focus on institutions, we focus on apparatus, but it's also important what kind of didactic means were introduced, and of course the possibility to publish this kind of photographs or to make this kind of charts is, I think, is essential in understanding its history and also the success of certain scholars and certain books. So I would recommend to study also those elements in the diffusion of this knowledge. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think that we can say you bye till tomorrow and wait for you tomorrow. And I hope you enjoyed the first day of our Congress.